getting all that out of the way, I want to go over just very briefly what we've been able to, on the Veterans Affairs this year in the last 18 months, have accomplished. And I think it's really extraordinary. There have been almost, I think, around 80 bills. We passed 9 this week. Over 24 signed into law by the President. There are over 35 that are currently in the Senate that are working their way through. The Senate obviously has been very, very busy, and I want to give a shout out to Senator Isaacson and Senators Tester, who've been phenomenal to work with, and also Ranking Member Walls has also been a great partner in this journey that we've made. When the President was a nominee before he was elected, I remember being up late at night, like probably many of you were, and in his acceptance speech, he was not 2 minutes into his speech until he began to speak about veterans. And I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I served in Korea in 1973 and 1974 in the 2nd Infantry Division near the DMZ in Korea. So what's going on there right now, public, is very, very important to me because I spent 13 months of my life in that country. But the President spoke passionately about what he wanted to do for veterans. And I'm a Vietnam era veteran, as General Bergman is, and I know how our veterans were treated at the end of that. It made an incredible impression on me when they would tell us when we came home from overseas, from Southeast Asia, you did not have to wear your uniform. I wore my uniform because I was proud of it. I'm proud of it today, and I'm proud to represent the veterans of this country. And during the last year, I'm going to very quickly go through and then turn over to my very capable colleagues what we've done. We passed a whistleblower and accountability act, and one of the first things we did, which was where the VA could terminate or discipline poor performing employees. We have over 360,000 employees. Most of these employees do a fantastic job. I have a VA medical center in my hometown, not a mile from where I live, and many of those folks are good friends of mine, and I know the great work they do. But in an organization that big, you do need that capability. That's what the Secretary said he needed. We gave that to him. We passed an appeals modernization. 400. When I got to Congress in 2009, was sworn there were 1 million backlogged appeals out there. That now has been reduced, but it's still far too many. It takes many, many years. We've given them now the ability, the VA, the ability to do this, to speed this up. And to show you how our committee is watching this, every 90 days since that bill has passed, we've had a full committee hearing on, are you getting this job done? Because it's supposed to go live next February. We also passed, which I think everyone up here takes great pride in, and I use this. When I got out of the Army in the end of 1974, 1975, I got $300 a month for my GI Bill. And I got that for 2 years, and I'm still grateful to my country for investing that money in me. I had a young family, a baby on the way, and a small child, 2 years old, and I was very grateful I got that help. But it terminated at 10 years. The Forever GI Bill, which the post 9/11 GI Bill, which is a great bill, but it terminated at 15 years. Now that bill, you can use it the rest of your life. We increased. I never served with Guard or Reserve units. I was in a drafted Army. Now we know that those men and women are called up just like active duty people are, and they serve right alongside their brothers and sisters in arms, and now we've increased their benefit. The other thing we did was we funded the Choice Bill, fully funded it until we could work a new direction for that bill, and which is the VA Mission Act. And I will tell you that is a transformative piece of legislation. It can be, or it will be just another piece of paper we've written and signed here if it's not implemented properly. And that's another thing that our committee needs to do. So the VA Mission Act, which has 3 parts. 1, how veterans get their care in the VA, whether it's outside the VA or inside the VA. A caregiver extension bill, and an asset review where we have a chance to look at the footprint of the VA. One of my passions when I got here, and it's now 9.5 years into this, but is the Blue Water Navy. We have a presumption for everybody who served in and around Vietnam, except people who served offshore and some who served in Thailand. We passed the Blue Water Navy 382-0. We fully paid for it. It's in the Senate. Senator Isaacson has assured us they're taking it up next week to look at it, have a hearing on it, which I wholeheartedly concur. We're going to do what's right by those 90,000 sailors who serve this country. what we've got on our plate going forward is a very important piece of how the VA will look, which is implementation of the electronic health record. This is absolutely critical for benefits, for billing, for health care, for all of those things. And I stood up with the help of my Democratic colleagues a specific subcommittee, very small, only 5 members, and Jim Banks, Congressman Banks, will chair that subcommittee. Their only focus is going to be on technology. It's called the Technology Modernization Subcommittee. We're going to work on the fall. We're going to work on mental health, how we're spending our money on homelessness, veteran suicide. All of those things are there. And with that, I want to stop and introduce Vice Chairman Bilirakis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've done an extraordinary job for our true American heroes. And I think that the reason we've been so successful in this committee is because we have a great chairman. But also, we put politics aside, we put partisanship aside, and we agree that we do what's in the best interest of our veterans. Again, the chairman said we passed 26 bills. And also, I want to talk about some of the local projects that I've accomplished. Just in the next couple of days, we will break ground on the new Haley bed tower in Tampa. I worked on that for a long time. As a matter of fact, the first proposal from the VA was to renovate the old bed tower, which was built in 1972. And we said we could save money because we were under a budget on the parking lot. And we could save money and give money actually back to the VA and build a whole new bed tower. It took me a while to get it approved by Secretary Shinseki a few years ago, but we got it done, and that's so very important. And also, we're expanding the outpatient clinic in Pasco County, West Pasco County, almost doubling the size. So, and consolidating the services, bringing new services to our local area so people don't have to travel. The veterans don't have to travel to Haley or Bay Pines in my particular area. Mental health has been an issue that I've been working on, the PTS issue, bringing in alternative therapies into the VA. Not one size fits all. And working with our chairman and this great committee, we've made great strides in that area. The veterans should have a choice, and the decision whether to stay in the community or go outside of the community or stay within the VA for care should be the veteran's decision, along with the consultation, again, with the physician, his or her physician. So we've done great things. We've got more things to do. The GI Bill, outstanding. The chairman mentioned that, lifting the time restrictions, very important. I have a bill that passed recently out of the VA committee and off the floor of the House of Representatives. We're hoping that the Senate will take it up to make sure that these schools, these universities, do not put pressure on the veteran when they don't get reimbursed immediately by the VA. So these bureaucratic slowdowns, if you will, should not affect the veteran. He or she has enough pressure, and they should be able to study and go on with their lives and not worry about some of these universities. I've heard pressure them into getting loans, temporary loans, to pay the tuition. That's just wrong. So in any case, we're doing a lot of good work. We have some great subcommittee chairs, and I'm really honored and proud. Veterans are my top priority. I've always said that in the United States Congress, and hopefully we've done a good job for them. I think we have. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I am enormously proud of what we have accomplished in this Congress under Chairman Rowe's leadership of the House Veteran Affairs Committee. As a veteran of the war in Afghanistan myself, and representing a district where Hoosiers in my district expect us to place a high premium on taking care of our veterans, we've done just that in historic fashion throughout this Congress, and I'm very proud to have been a part of it. There have been a number of bills that you're going to hear more about that Dr. Rowe's already talked about, from expanding GI benefits to the Accountability Act, that have received above the fold headlines in newspapers as are well deserved, but there are dozens of bills that this committee has passed that never received a single mention in the media, from reforming the Veterans Crisis Line and studying it further to address veteran suicides, to reforms to laws that allow for headstones for our veterans, our deceased veterans and their families. A couple of bills that I've introduced that have seen passed and signed into law by this president. There are literally dozens of issues that we've tackled that affect thousands of veterans that I've been very proud to have been a part of under Chairman Rowe's leadership. I also want to commend Chairman Rowe for, as he's already mentioned, setting up this new oversight committee of technology modernization that I'm very proud to chair. Even though this administration is from the same party as the majority party in the Congress, we still place a high value of importance on oversight. And when it comes to the largest IT project in federal government history, overseeing the modernization implementation of electronic health records, it's our job on this committee to provide proper oversight, and this chairman has placed a high premium on that. I'm very proud to chair the subcommittee that will oversee a nearly $16 billion modernization of electronic health records. So with that, look forward to introducing and hearing from Dr. Neil Dunn, a veteran himself, who chairs the health subcommittee of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and appreciate his hard work as well.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving us this opportunity. It's a great honor to represent our veterans and work to ensure that they get the care that they earned. As veteran and a doctor myself, I take my responsibilities seriously to serve those who fought for our freedoms, and I think we've accomplished a great deal in the last year. We still have a lot to do to make sure the VA remains responsive to the needs of our veterans. We had several great pieces of legislation signed into law by President Trump this year. Legislation that will change how and where the veterans get their health care. Legislation that makes it easier to hire and fire employees at the VA. And legislation that expands the education benefits for the veterans. Now comes a time to ensure that the VA follows through and keeps their promise to our veterans. We have to remain committed to the task of oversight, and believe me, this is not an easy task. I hear from veterans every day who tell us that there are unnecessary roadblocks between them and the care that they need and they deserve. One great piece of legislation that we got across the finish line this year was the VA Mission Act. This is an important piece that secures the veterans' ability to access quality health care in or out of the VA system and ensures that we're fulfilling our promise to them. It builds upon the success of the CHOICE Act and the CHOICE program and streamlines the access to community care programs so that the veterans can get care more locally. The VA Mission Act also includes two of my healthcare initiatives that protect our veterans who are receiving organ transplants, and it helps to curb the opioid epidemic. Again, our next steps are to ensure the VA does its job. It implements these important changes, and as we've seen in the past, they sometimes are not as open to change as we would like. Thankfully, we have a team that is led by Dr. Phil Rowe. I believe we can and will help instill real change at the VA under Dr. Rowe's leadership, and I look forward to continuing that work with Chairman Rowe. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Jody Arrington from West Texas. Represent 40,000 veterans throughout the 29 counties, a big swath of rural America. And I know my chairman appreciates the unique challenges and the contributions of our country boys and country girls. And there's not a greater honor for me than to serve those who wore the uniform and those who served us and answered the call of duty. And this is really the highlight of my service here. This is the highest calling for me, is to make sure we do right by our veterans and we deliver on what we promised, and as my colleague said, what they've earned. I think really it's a tribute to our veterans, but I also want to say that the chairman, as the leader of the committee, and ranking member Waltz really set the tone that this would be a bipartisan effort. We would roll up our sleeves, we'd put partisanship aside, we'd be Americans first when we walked into that committee room, and we would go to trying to produce and serve our veterans. And 70 bills out of the House later, over 20 bills signed in law. This is, and I think it's worth noting, a 20-year high for this Congress in terms of bipartisan legislation passing. That is, bills, reform bills, like what came out of the VA committee, that had both Democrat and Republican support. 20-year high. So I know we make much about this hyper-partisanship, but I can tell you that has not been my experience. It's certainly on the VA committee, and again, I want to congratulate Chairman Rowe for setting that tone. Whether it's expanding healthcare opportunities or employment opportunities to training, apprenticeship program. There's one that didn't probably get a big headline, but we've made it easier for companies to offer apprenticeship programs to veterans. The average graduate of apprenticeship program makes $60,000. That's real money, and that's a good quality of life for a veteran who's looking for a job. So I'm honored to serve as chairman of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee. The chairman mentioned the Forever GI Bill. He mentioned one aspect, I'll mention one more, and that is that if you received the Purple Heart and you literally took a bullet for this country, you go to the front of the line. You don't have to wait. And I think that's the right thing to do. Transition Assistance Program, where we have spent an enormous amount of money transforming our civilians into the great freedom fighters that we have in all of our armed services. And then when we transition them out back to civilian life, we need to make sure that we support them, that we provide them all the tools for the most seamless and successful transition so they can be just as mission focused, just as productive, and make just as much of a contribution as a civilian as they did in the military. That one's very personal to me. We named it after a good friend of mine from high school, Navy SEAL Bill Mulder. So again, lots of great things, and for me, again, bipartisan and very productive, and I congratulate the chairman and my colleagues on both the Republican and the Democrat side, because this was truly not red, not blue, red, white, and blue for our veterans. God bless.
Good morning, everyone. You know, when you're the last subcommittee chairman to talk, you get to hit cleanup, and you've heard my colleagues all articulate the type of bills we've passed, the bipartisan nature. It's been an honor to serve in my first term in Congress here as a subcommittee chairman, oversight and investigation. It all starts with leadership, and under the leadership of Chairman Rowe, and the chairman already talked about our commonality of being Vietnam-era veterans. We, under his leadership, have a perspective, committee-wide, Democrat and Republican, that has evolved, if you will, over the 18-plus months we've been here into one singular focus: positive outcomes for veterans. It's no more complicated than that. Where it gets complicated is when, on the oversight piece of what we do as a committee, coordinating the efforts of very different parts of a very huge and complex bureaucracy within the Veterans Administration. It is what it is, but it doesn't have to stay that way. So the focus of O&I is to work with VA to look into how can we do better for the outcome of the individual veterans, whether it means simply benefits paid, educational benefits understood, or health care delivered. In fact, when you think about the complexity of our healthcare delivery system in this country, you have rural and you have, let's say, urban and suburban. First District of Michigan, kind of like West Texas, is pretty rural. If we can deliver healthcare to our veterans in the rural districts, like we are doing in the First District of Michigan, we are going to be successful across the country when it comes to providing the healthcare for our veterans. The future is ours to work with the Veterans Administration to, sure, we have to sometimes call out bad behavior. That bubbles naturally. The most important thing we can do is a committee is working with VA to call out the good behavior so those who aren't sure have an example to which they can aspire. We have the opportunity to continue to move this forward on behalf of the veterans. Under the chairman's leadership, we have taken that opportunity in a very bipartisan way. One of the ways we've done that is that we have increased the use of roundtables as opposed to hearings and subcommittee hearings. So we have learned more as committee members in the roundtables where you have all the stakeholders, the VSOs, the VA, the providers there. And it gets very interesting at times, but it gets productive at times. And this is all about outcomes for the veterans. Progress is slow sometimes, but when you're at the pointy end of the spear, you know that you need to move fast. And an example of progress was slow, starting new clinics. Next week I get a chance to attend the groundbreaking of a new VA clinic in Traverse City, Michigan. That was a slow process, but now that the ground is being broken, the additional services for the veterans in our area is going to increase. And as we combine that with the choice program and getting the veteran the care they need, whether it be within the VA system or with a local provider, and that local provider getting paid, it's a cycle that is overdue, and but it is coming to fruition in the areas that we need it to happen. So thank you for the opportunity, Chairman, to be one of your subcommittee chairmen, and thank you to all my colleagues, again, across the aisle, for all the efforts that you have put into helping us on O&I be your partner for this first term. Thank you.
Mike Hoffman, 6th Congressional District, State of Colorado. I want to first of all thank Chairman Rowe for his leadership in this committee, as well as all of our subcommittee chairmen. As a Iraq War veteran who served for a total of 21 years in the military, Army, Marine Corps, both are reserve components, 5 overseas deployments, 2 in combat. It's just an honor to serve on this committee, and I think it's we've gone over the top line part, so I'm not going to repeat that, of the accomplishments legislatively. But let me talk about 3 issues that I worked on, and let me talk about holding those responsible. I mean, at a personal level, I believe that we have to hold those responsible for failure within the VA system accountable. So let me address first. We were able to pass in the House a bill I introduced, Veterans Urgent Access to Mental Health Care Act. This was very important that particularly the United States Army, when they were downsizing in Iraq and Afghanistan, used the other than honorable discharge tool as a way to bring down its numbers, in-strength numbers. And I think that was wrong to discharge combat veterans for minor infractions. And so what this bill does, and they were denied mental health care from the VA as well as other services, what this bill does is it puts in a presumption of PTSD and provides them the mental health care that really they need, particularly when we're having a little over 20 veteran suicides a day. And I think this population is certainly a part of that. And so mandates or requires the VA provide services for them despite their discharge. A Veteran Treatment Court Improvement Act, what this does is expands veteran treatment courts. I think that's very important. I've been to one in Colorado. They're very effective in terms of having a VA representative there with mental health services, substance abuse services, other services, to essentially keep veterans out of incarceration, to give them a second chance. And I think that that's a very effective bill, particularly for those that are having trouble making the transition from military service to civilian life. Peer-to-Peer Counseling Act, what this does is it increases the number of peer-to-peer counselors, particularly for women, that the VA is slow to recognize the increase in women serving in the military that are now becoming in part of the veterans pipeline. I think that's very important. And lastly, I want to plan to sit down very shortly with the new Secretary of the VA to tell him in no uncertain terms that he's got a clean house, at the top. And if he doesn't do that, no matter what he says or does, he will ultimately fail. Case in point, last Saturday, we opened up a VA hospital in the state of Colorado. I'm proud that it is there to meet our nation's obligations to the men and women who serve this country in uniform. However, it is the largest construction failure in the history of the VA. Over $1 billion in cost overruns, years behind schedule. I led the fight in Congress to have VA construction management replaced with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they've been there for the last few years and have taken this project to completion. Also led the fight to strip the VA permanently of their construction management authority to ever build a hospital again. With all that, the individual who was in charge of the director of construction and facilities management is still the director of construction and facilities management, despite these documented failures. I think the new secretary needs to go through all these SES positions, the highest position, senior executive service. There are about 400 of them in the Department of VA, where there are documented failures in terms of Government Accountability Office reports or VA OIG reports that have not been corrected year after year with the same people there. He's got to clean house. He's got to get rid of these people. And with that, if he doesn't do that, then again, things will, the culture of bureaucratic incompetence in the VA will not change.
Thank you, Chairman Rhodes. I mean, for me, it is, let me begin saying that I could not be more prouder to be in this committee. I'm the first Puerto Rican as member of this committee since it was created in the 1940s. And this is the first time ever the committee actually got a field hearing in Puerto Rico. Nobody can believe that before, but yes, having more than 100,000 veterans residing in Puerto Rico, never before a committee got a hearing on the island. And we actually not just got a hearing, we visited the hospital, we visited the clinics after the Hurricane Maria, and the committee actually, and the chairman, I want to thank you directly for your leadership and Chairman Wenstrup and the members that were there, and all my colleagues both sides of the aisle, for supporting the resources, for restoring the funds for all the clinics that were completely damaged. As we were speaking, still 2 clinics are completely shut down. They're working in a parking lot, one in Arecibo and one in Vieques. So that can tell you what's going on, and the committee has been there with me all the time. Actually, he even called me the day of the hurricane. That can tell you what kind of leadership we are having in this committee, and not just that, working in a bipartisan way to approve landmark legislation. So I feel honored to be part of this committee under his leadership with all my colleagues working different areas. And actually during this week, I got my first bill being passed by the House, HR 5938, to alleviate staffing shortages within the VA by further engaging with the Department of Defense to fill existing vacancies, mainly in the island, but across the whole nation. This is a problem that is still there, and this is just one of the tools that we are providing. There are significant source of discomfort and concerns, not just for my constituents, but for most of the veterans, and this is veterans serving veterans, providing this kind of tools, and I'm pleased that this bill is a step forward in the right direction. I do think that the way of working, those front tables that the general were talking about, the hearings, the amount of hearings this committee had during the last year and a half, the amount of bills that are being already approved is the best statement and testament of the commitment of working on behalf of our veterans. Puerto Ricans have served in the armed force. More than 300,000 Puerto Ricans have served in the armed forces of the United States without the right to vote for their commander-in-chief, but they serve proudly. And we need to solve a lot of deficiencies within the VA, but the legislation that has been passed, I think never before in the last 30 years, has been more aggressive than we have done in the last year and a half. And with that, I feel proud, and I want to thank the chairman for giving us the opportunity.
Talofa, and thank you. I'm Omua Amata, and I'm privileged to serve and represent the great people of American Samoa. I sincerely and truly appreciate the leadership of Chairman Rowe, Vice Chairman Bilirakis, subcommittee chairs, and serving with members who genuinely care about our veterans, as shown by a track record of real accomplishments, working to reform the VA, increase access to services, better record keeping, modernization, and looking into telehealth options for rural and distant places, such as the islands in the midst of the Pacific Ocean. American Samoa is not a large place, but it has an outsized per capita role in our armed forces. In fact, our local Army recruiter has the highest enlistment rate in the nation. As a result, we have a lot of veterans in American Samoa. Because of our island's geographic and economic isolation, our veterans have extra challenges in getting access to health care. Often, that includes an overnight flight to Honolulu just for some of the simpler medical services. It's important to continue focusing on improving the health care available in our islands, and we look to telehealth to add options. I'm hopeful that the new Hawaii cable will be a building block for telehealth capabilities locally. Our nation has a great commitment to our veterans, and I'm pleased and honored to serve with people who take that commitment seriously on behalf of our veterans. Thank you. Manuela Waso.
Well, thank you all, and I think you can see what a privilege it is to work on this committee. We actually had a bill on the floor yesterday, and it was a bill so that if a veteran, an active duty military were called up, that they were already with passes where they would be relieved from, they could get out of their cell phone contract. And then the next step was to be able to not to be able to break your internet and your cable TV. And I started thinking, General Bergman, that when I went in and when you went in, there wasn't a cell phone, there was no cable TV, no internet until Al Gore invented it, and that was long after I left to go overseas. So I thought, wow, I didn't have to do any of those things, but now that shows you how it's changed. And these remarkable women, I tell you this, they bring so much to our committee, a view that we did not have before. And I want to give a shout out to both of them. And we did visit Puerto Rico, and I saw the passion she had after the hurricane, and did a remarkable job of working for the people of Puerto Rico. And I'm talking about all the people of Puerto Rico. Not all of them should have voted for her, but they didn't. But she did, and you just heard the challenges that you have in American Samoa. And so those are all things you don't think about when you're here in the U.S. But they bring that perspective, which is very important because they represent veterans just like we do where we live. So I'll take any questions or any of the members that you'd like to ask if you have any. Yes.
The Mission Act is great and all, but have you heard anything about the appropriators actually funding it?
Well, I know this about the question is the Mission Act is great, but what about appropriators funding it? You know, we passed basically a agreed on cap, and I think that money is in the budget now, and I think the appropriators, we always have funded our veterans. When I got in the U.S. Congress, we were just 9.5 years ago, we spent $93.5 billion. That asked this year is $192 billion. The money will be there. Yes.
So when this was being passed, House Democrats were the only one that, or it seemed to be the only ones that really raised the funding issue. And now it's the main sticking point with all these spending bills. Are you any more concerned than you were when that was passed?
And the reason I'm not concerned is that as Winston Churchill said, Americans will do everything else until they'll finally do the right thing. And we'll do the right thing here. They'll exhaust every other option until they do the right thing. We have always provided funding for our veterans. We will do it again. And remember, when we passed the Budget Control Act in 2011, the discretionary part of our budget, that part, 30-something% of it, that actually stayed level for almost until we changed the caps this past year with the omnibus we passed. Remember that we increased the funding during that time. I mean, it went up dramatically. So that money came from somewhere else. both sides of the aisle will make sure this money gets there for the Mission Act.
So you're expecting them to raise the caps
No,
or find
No, I think
funding
we'll
elsewhere?
find the money under the caps.
Okay.
Yes.
Donovan Slack, USA Today. Robert Wilkie will be the 4th VA secretary in 5 years. What can he do differently? What does he need to do to succeed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the problems that the VA's had is that lack of leadership, stable leadership at the top. Actually, we need a secretary that you know is going to be there for 8 years. I'd like to see someone stay through 2 terms, either Republican or Democrat, whoever's in the White House. The 10th floor at the VA is basically empty now. I mean, they're beginning to fill in those holes, but we need that leadership and stable leadership. And hopefully, Secretary Wilkie, we're here to help him succeed. Now, we're going to be his best ally and his worst critic. Our job is to oversee these pieces of legislation. We're going to do our job, and I can tell you from a technology standpoint, we got ahead of that. I remember sitting in my chair on the dais when we spent $1 billion, and I pointed out to people that's $1,000 million to try to make the Alta and Vista systems talk to each other, and we failed. And I thought, that is crazy for me to go home and tell people. I mean, there's some little nerd with a pocket thing in riding around the Caribbean in a long, basically in a yacht now, but we didn't get anything for that money. The taxpayers and the veterans didn't get anything, and that's why we're going to be very proactive in all these things. That's how we can help. So we're there to help the Secretary be successful. And I think what Congressman Kaufman said, there need to be some changes. All of those things are part of the equation. And like I said, the Mission Act will simply be a piece of paper if we don't implement it properly.
Last question.
Okay. Yes.
Robert Wilkie said he didn't have anyone in mind for all these senior positions during his confirmation hearing. Have you heard any updates on that, or are those positions going to be filled shortly?
Well, he hasn't found out where the bathrooms are yet, so I will give him a little bit of time. But we'll meet with him shortly. I'm sure we'll be having a conversation by phone during the August work period, and I look forward to helping. Hope he gets those filled quickly with quality people. Look, people want to serve our American veterans. They really do, and you can find some great people to step up and do just that. And I expect that he will have quality people in line, and we need to do it sooner rather than later. Okay, thank you all very, very much.